It's with pleasure that I introduce the next speaker. He has been on the radio show KYCC Healthline with me approximately 3 or 4 times. I love his work. I've learned from his work. You've heard me speak on emotions and cancer and the relationship of breast cancer to bad marriages and enzymes in live food, and I quote Dr. Joel Robbins. He's an MD, a chiropractor, a naturopath, physician. He comes from Oklahoma. He is a wonderful Christian man. I thought I saw a tear in his eye back here. I asked him, what did you expect when you were coming to this crusade? He says, I didn't expect this at all. He has a wonderful message of health and healing. I believe you will enjoy him tremendously. And he, as a humble man, also gives all praise and honor to the throne where our Lord and our Father sit. So with further ado, I welcome to Modern Manna's Health and Healing Crusade for the first time, perhaps not the last, Dr. Joel Robbins.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? That is, if you want to. A grade school teacher one time said to her students, next week we're going to study religions. And I want each of you to do a show and tell, give each of you a turn. And we want you to just tell us what religion you come from, and then bring some relic, something that would represent your religion as part of your presentation. So the next week rolled around, and she called on the first little boy, and he gets up and he said, my name is Tommy, I'm Catholic, and this is a crucifix. The next little boy is called up, and so my name is Benjamin, I'm Jewish, and this is the Star of David. Called on the third fellow. He got up and he said, my name is Bobby. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. This is a casserole. Somehow we just can't seem to get together in the Christian realm without food. It's just food and fellowship seem to go together, don't they? Do you know, as I speak around the country, some of the toughest audiences are Christian audiences as far as receiving this message of health. And what I've come to conclude is that it's because food is the only vice that Christians have. You know, they don't smoke, they don't go out and gamble and those type of things. You know, you can talk about anything but not our food. That's our only pleasure in life. And if I can't have my coffee and apple pie and ice cream, there's just no point in living. Well, as the one fellow said, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself, right? So what we want to talk about and what this whole conference is all about is that we have the responsibility, in my session later on this afternoon, we'll get into that in more detail before the Lord, the responsibility to take care of this temple. But secondly, that how easy it is. We try to complicate this thing, and it becomes overwhelming to people. And yet it's quite easy. Our health is determined by the fork on our plate, isn't it? And our fork is our best health assurance policy. What is on that fork? That's the question. And what I want to do in the 2 sessions I have with you is cover just a philosophy, getting away from the lifestyle, the traditional medical model we've all grown up with and still struggle with, even though often in the natural health realm. So many take with them what I call the medical mentality. Still haven't seen the big picture of what it's all about and how freeing it is once we get beyond that model. And then we're also going to look at just some very practical application of a better lifestyle. A long time ago, I quit telling my patients what to do and what not to do. Don't eat chocolate, it's bad for you. Well, that lasted about 3 days. And so what I began to do is say, let me explain to you what chocolate does to you. Now it's your choice, it's your decision. And so that's what I have changed my practice to become a teacher versus a physician. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But first, let's just talk about complementary medicine. You ever heard that term, complementary medicine? How about alternative medicine? I prefer the term complementary medicine. I'd like you to grab a hold of that term and use that. Alternative medicine implies that we want to do away with traditional medicine. And I don't think we do. I mean, if you're lying in the street after a car accident and your guts are hanging out, do you want to go see the acupuncturist? What's the herbologist going to do for you in this state? No, we need traditional medicine, but we need to understand its perspective and what it does and what it doesn't do. But we also need something that I call complementary medicine, something to come alongside and fill the gap that traditional medicine is not doing. We're not trying to do away with traditional medicine. We want to work alongside of it. We want to try to prevent problems so we never, ideally, would even have to consult with traditional medicine. But then if we do find ourselves in some kind of medical crises, that we consult with traditional medicine to deal with the crises. Then once that's over, then we say, all right, what can I do, consulting a complementary medicine person, what can I do to reverse this, undo it, and prevent future problems? Some medical conditions are so far advanced when a person sees the light that the body just cannot overcome. There's just not enough time. But what we can do with complementary medicine is come alongside traditional and make the best of that situation. We're not anti-traditional. We just want to keep it in its proper perspective. And what is that? What is that proper perspective? Well, traditional medicine has nothing to do with health. Zero. When I was in medical school, we didn't have one course on health. Not one. You know, the medical mind is trained to find the disease and treat the disease. Find the disease and treat the disease. What does that have to do with health? Nothing. And as you well know, treating the disease so often is not healing the disease. It's simply dealing with the symptom, covering the symptom. Crisis care, that's what traditional medicine is all about. Some kind of life-threatening situation, that's when we would consult traditional medicine. But once the condition is stabilized, then we need to be asking ourselves, what did I do wrong to get in that mess? And what do I need to do to undo it and prevent future problems? Natural health is not a passing fad. When I first got into it 20 years ago or so, it was new, a new resurgence of it, I should say. It's far more accepted today. I mean, look at this room. 20 years ago, we might have had just a small fraction of people here. Americans are waking up, they're figuring out that traditional medicine does not have the answer to health, and yet we have consulted with traditional medicine for years looking for health. And because traditional medicine does not know what health is, does not know how to offer it, I believe that's the reason we're one of the sickest nations in the world. That's by the admission of the American Medical Association and the World Health Organization. Do you know that in 1900, a person over the age of 40, 30% rather, of people over age 40 suffered from a chronic degenerative disease. 30% over age 40 suffered from a chronic degenerative disease. That'd be something like cancer, arthritis, diabetes, heart disease. 30%. Now, since 1900, we have gained more knowledge in the realm of health and disease than all of history combined. We have the best doctor-patient ratio of any nation in the world. Our hospital industry is one of the largest nations in this country, one of the largest industries in this country. You think of the tremendous advances in medical science and all the medications that are now available. So using a little logic, What should be the incidence of chronic degenerative disease today compared to 1900? See, we're so much smarter. We have so much to offer. Well, obviously that number will drop. Instead of 30%, maybe it's down to 10% of people over age 40 suffer from chronic degenerative disease. No. It's 70% of the population over age 40 suffer from at least one and often two chronic degenerative diseases. This in spite of these tremendous advances that we have in traditional medicine. Did you know it's rare for a person to suffer from more than one fatal disease during their lifetime? Those of you who got it, tell those who didn't. I don't have all day, all right? I'm supposed to get my jokes. No, you see, we have sought out traditional care for health, and yet that has not been what is offered. An average American living to be 76 years of age will spend 12 of those years suffering from some sort of disease. I'm not talking about allergies and colds and flus. I'm talking about some debilitating condition. 12 of those years when it's not necessary, when there's no reason at all for that to happen. As we look around the world, we see cultures alive and well, have been well documented, who are living to be 100, 110, 120 years of age. That's not the point. The point is they do not know disease. I think of the Hunzakuts in northwest India in the Himalayan mountains. These people live to be 110 or more, do not know disease. They work to virtually the day they die. They just go to sleep one day and that's it. Go to sleep and they move on. And these poor people do not have the wonderful advantages that we do of medical science. You know, they have to stumble by somehow on raw fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds. You know, they don't have that Wonder Bread that builds bodies in 12 wonderful ways. You know, why they call it Wonder Bread, you wonder what's in it. So we're really not here to talk about how long we live. That's up to God. What we're talking about is the quality of life that we have the option of. We have the option of. One time a medical doctor called me and said, listen to your tape, and it sounds like you're saying that we have absolute total control over our health picture. And I said, well, you didn't quite hear me correctly, but I was saying that we have a tremendous influence on our health. There are certain things we don't have control over, like air pollution, radiation, things like that, genetic weaknesses and so forth, that we just can't ultimately do anything about. But we can do a lot to help the body deal with those things and make the best of the situation. And I said to this fellow, I said, you've raised children? He said, yes. I said, why did you bring them up in the nourishment and admonition of the Lord? Was that a guarantee they wouldn't rebel? Adam and Eve had the perfect parent. They rebelled. He said, no, it's not a guarantee they wouldn't, but at least increasing the opportunity, the chances that they would not rebel, increasing the chance that they live for the Lord. I said, there it is. Same with our body. It's not a mystery why we get sick. It's because of the bad decisions that we make with the fork on our plate. And we can have and have the responsibility to turn that around. What are the two causes of disease? Only two. Nutritional deficiencies and toxicity. Nutritional deficiencies and toxicity. Let's think about that a second. Here's a cell, a perfectly healthy cell. In it is the genetic code telling this cell how to reproduce itself when it wears out, when it runs its lifespan, how to reproduce a second cell, next generation, perfectly healthy, 100%. What would keep that from happening? In other words, when it's time for this cell to go on, to die, to run its lifespan, and reproduce itself, what would keep that next generation of cells from being perfect, healthy? Because you see, the program is perfect. A heart cell has a program of another perfect heart cell in it. We somehow have this idea that when we're born, there's a computer program that's initiated. And that computer program is, yes, it's going to cause us to grow to adulthood, but then it begins to wind us down. And so by the time we're 35, 40, we just fully expect that some of the energy is going to be gone. That's just the program. And by the time we're 55, 60, we fully expect, not that we want it, but it's just part of life, isn't it? We fully expect that we're going to have a few glands and organs missing from surgeries. And by the time we're 60, 65, 70, we'll be on some medications, we'll have a chronic degenerative disease. No, nobody wants those things, but that's what we expect because surely that's just the program. And why do we come to accept that as normal? Because we look around and we see everybody else falling apart in that manner. So it obviously is just the way that God designed us. It's not normal. What is it? Common. It's common. We've come to accept common as normal, and that's why I say we need to look at the Hunzakits in the Himalayan mountains and look at the Georgians in Russia. And these people just don't know what disease is. And here's how it's supposed to work. Here's this cell getting ready to replicate itself if the adequate nutrition is present at that moment and there's no toxic interference. Then that next generation of cells will be perfectly healthy. Let's say that 40 years ago you went down to the car lot and you bought a brand new car. And every time a part wears out, you go to the factory and you buy a brand new replacement part. Here it is 40 years later, you've replaced literally every part in that car, some parts several times. What kind of car do you have today? Brand new, just 40 years old. As opposed to going to the junkyard to replace a part, buying a used replacement. Yes, this replacement part is better than the one that you're replacing, but it's still used. What kind of car do you have today? It's showing its age. And so as scientists look at the cells, they say there is no reason for a cell to age and ultimately succumb to disease. There's a famous chicken heart experiment where this scientist took the heart out of a chicken in a laboratory, he put it in saline solution and feed it nutrition, remove the waste products. And he watched this thing for 35 years. It never showed one sign of aging. 35 years. Think about the lifespan of a chicken. And this researcher died, and his lab assistant took over and continued to watch the same thing. No change in this heart. And he finally got bored with this and let the chicken heart die. All they did is feed it the proper nutrition, take away the waste products. And so the design of these bodies, we're not designed to succumb to disease, not designed to age, if proper nutrition is available and there's no toxic interference. As I said, there are some aging factors, if you will, we cannot escape, such as air pollution or radiation. The quality of the raw produce that we're getting these days is diminishing. So there's certain things that we can't overcome, but we can still make the best of it. One of my biggest beefs with traditional medicine is their view of health. They see the body as either healthy or diseased. That's it. So in other words, if you go to the doctor and you have various symptoms, and he runs all the tests, and he sits down with you and says, look, everything's fine. Nothing wrong with you. But doc, I have all these symptoms. Well, the tests say there's nothing wrong with you, but you know you are 50 years old. You know what the number one prescribed medication in this country is? What group I should say? It's antidepressants. And it's for this reason right here we're talking about, is that every day, hundreds, thousands of Americans go see the doctor with a list of symptoms. All the tests come back normal, and the patient still complains. There's still something wrong. The doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just depressed. Here, take this antidepressant. You see, they view the body as either healthy or as diseased. So if that body is breaking down, but it hasn't crossed the threshold of disease, meaning it won't show up on a test as having a problem, then that body is deemed healthy. We want to throw in a third category, third possibility, and that is the state of dis-ease. It's not health, It's not disease, but it's in there in the middle. One time a fellow went to see the doctor. The doctor ran all the tests, and the doctor sat down with him and said, "Well, I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you. You have a fatal condition. You're going to die." The fellow said, "Well, how much time do I have, Doc?" The doctor said, 10. He said, "Well, is that 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months? What is it? How long?" 9, 8. One time a patient told me she went in to see a doctor with a list of symptoms, and he ran all these tests, and he sat down with her and said, "Everything's normal. There's nothing wrong with you." And she told me that she sat up, put her fist on his desk, and looked him straight in the eye and said, "Doc, I've just paid you $350. You better tell me there's something wrong with me." Here's another one. A patient told me she'd been for her annual physical. I said, What'd you learn? She said, "Well, he said everything looked great except my blood pressure was on the rise." Well, what advice did he offer you? Well, he said it was not high enough to prescribe any medication, but to come back and see him when it was high enough to recommend medication. You see, she hadn't crossed the threshold of disease, so there was nothing to prescribe. And that's the problem with this country, is we look to traditional medicine for health care, and they know nothing about health. And we need to change that. We need to look at taking on responsibility for ourselves. Here's a little scenario that happens every day in this country. Cardiologist walks into the ICU, sits down with the patient, says, "Mr. Jones, yesterday you had a massive heart attack. You should have died, but thanks to modern medicine, crisis care, we're able to save your life." Now, I need to tell you something, Mr. Jones, as your doctor, as your teacher, that this heart problem did not happen by chance. It wasn't just your fate in life. No, you worked for the right to have this heart disease. You earned it. You know, I like to say, I tell my patients, health is a gift. Disease is something that we earn. Health is a gift. Disease is something that we earn. And you'll see that as the day goes on. And so, Mr. Jones, you're the one that created this disease, whether it be out of ignorance or you just didn't care. I don't know which, but I know that that heart is just a muscle. It can mend. And if we stop the negatives that created this problem and we begin to feed your body what it needs to operate properly and mend, that heart can come back and we can prevent future problems. Secondly, you're on some medications. Now, the medications are keeping you alive right now, but they have their side effects. And I'd like to get you off of those. And so as you take responsibility for your health, and I'm here to coach you, and encourage you, and educate you, as the body returns to health, we're going to be able to get off of those medications. Now, that happens every day, doesn't it? No, not at all. You know, this whole concept of incurable diseases, from a medical viewpoint, I can appreciate that. You've got this condition, you're going to be in these medications the rest of your life. But you see, traditional medicine sends the patient home to keep doing the same wrong thing that created the problem. Of course, it's incurable. We see miracles every day in our clinic. They're not miracles when you understand how God created this body to operate and run. It's just sick because we are abusing it in some way. We remove the abuse, hand it the nutrients it's designed to run on, miracle. It's not a miracle. It's just an uncommon event in our culture. Traditional medicine covers the symptoms, very much like cutting the wire to the fire alarm and thinking, right, I don't hear the alarm anymore, the fire must be out. And you know, we have that philosophy so ingrained in us that as we go over to non-traditional medicine, whether as a practitioner going to complementary medicine or as a consumer, as a patient, moving over in that direction, so many still have the medical mentality. Now, what is that medical mentality? Oh, I've got a headache. What herb can I take to overcome that headache? That should not be our first question. Or which acupuncture point do I need to stimulate to get rid of this condition or that condition? That's the medical mentality, which is what? Take this for that. Well, wait a minute. Why do we have headaches? Do we ever ask that question? Do we have headaches because of herbal deficiencies? No such thing. Do we have headaches because of aspirin deficiencies? No such thing, right? We don't have sinus problems because of an acupuncture needle deficiency. But we never ask those questions. You see, symptoms are our friends. Symptoms are our friends. What do symptoms do for us? They alert us, hey, idiot, you're doing something wrong. I'm not designed to have a symptom unless you violate me. I'm giving you a signal. And so the symptoms should not drive us to seek out what remedy, what therapy, what drug, what herb. That shouldn't be our first question. The symptoms should drive us to think, what did I do wrong to this body that's caused it to react this way? I find it interesting, the average American never asks that question when they have a symptom. The one exception is when people go out and drink too much the night before and they wake up with a hangover. They usually put that together. But of course, the lesson is soon lost. Next Friday night, they're back out there doing it again. But virtually every other symptom, it's, Doc, what can I take? So we need to change that way of thinking. Now, I'm not opposed to various natural therapies, not at all. I'm just saying if we're looking at those as the treatment, as the cure, we've missed it. We've missed it. Because we'll take that and maybe get some relief, but not have changed the lifestyle that caused the wrong problem, only to develop a worse problem down the road. Oh, we didn't do drugs, we didn't do surgery. That's great. That's a step forward. But we need to get the big picture. What did I do wrong? And sometimes that means I need to seek counsel from someone, talk to a natural health care practitioner, try to get some more insight into what I was doing wrong. Symptoms are our friends. They're not the enemy. You got a headache? The headache's not the problem. The headache is your body screaming you're doing something wrong. And so for us to take something to get rid of the headaches without considering causes, we've got a medical mentality. Let's talk about drug therapy for a second. Any medication you want to name, if we put that in a healthy person, that person will become sick. That's the body trying to deal with that poison. So this is the logic of drug therapy. We're going to take a sick person, hand them a poison, and expect them to get well. This makes sense, doesn't it? The saddest thing about drug therapy, and I'm going to throw in some natural therapies too in this category, is that they give relief. You say, you sadist? Well, because they give relief, the person is not provoked to ask deeper questions. They think because I've got relief, I can just go on life's merry way and all is forgiven. Only to continue doing the same wrong thing to create worse problems down the road. How do drugs work? You ask a pharmacist, how does aspirin kill pain? And they'll give you some chemical mumbo jumbo, but they really don't know. You see, here's the big mystery about aspirin. No matter where the pain is in the body, aspirin will kill the pain with one exception: stomach. It doesn't touch stomach pain or intestinal pain. Now wait a minute, if the aspirin is numbing the entire body, why is the stomach the exception? That's part of the body. Well, let's say you're out in the woods hunting and you get a thorn in your finger and you decide to walk back to camp and get some tweezers and get that out. And as you're walking through the barnyard, you step on a nail. Do you remember the thorn in your finger? Was it cured? No, it's still there. It's just that there was a more life-threatening situation happening in the foot. And so the body simply shifted attention from the finger to the foot. Now you're climbing through the barbed wire fence and shoot your toe off with a shotgun. Do you remember the nail in your foot? All we did is shift the energy. There's only so much in the bucket. Shift the energy to the more life-threatening situation. So if you have a headache, which is generally caused from toxic blood, and we take an aspirin, that aspirin is going to create a second crisis. Every aspirin, buffered or not, will cause a teaspoon of bleeding somewhere in the intestinal tract. Which is more life-threatening, internal bleeding or toxic blood? But generally, internal bleeding is. And so the body simply shifts its attention from the head to deal with the stomach crises. See, again, the person didn't have a headache due to a salicylic acid deficiency or an aspirin deficiency. No such thing. But if you take 2 aspirin, the headache does not go away. What do we know? That internal bleeding was not more life-threatening than the toxic blood, so now we're going to take 6 aspirin. See, that'll fix it. But do you understand why aspirin does not take care of stomach pain? See, where's the body already focused when you have stomach pain? The tension's right there in the stomach. So if I take aspirin, I'm not shifting the body's attention anywhere else. It's staying right there. So if you have stomach pain, you want to take Tylenol because that plays havoc with the liver. And basically, with some exceptions, that's how all drugs work. They simply create a crisis that is greater than the problem for which we complain. Did that solve anything? I was at a medical conference a few years ago, and our speaker was an anesthesiologist, and his opening comments were this: of all the drugs that we use to keep people asleep during surgery, not one of them do we know how they work. That was very comforting. I wanted to raise my hand and say, I have an idea. Maybe it's energy economics. Could it be that drug is so toxic to the body says, I cannot both keep you awake and keep you alive. I'm going to knock you out to free up the energy that's keeping you conscious, to take that energy and detoxify this drug. That's how they work. You know, read on the label, do not operate machinery or drive while taking this medication. That's what's happening. There's a story about a fellow who'd take his medication and just make him kind of flip out. He'd get on his bicycle and he'd go riding and sort of wake up, and he was 2 miles from his house or 2 blocks. And one day this happened again. He woke up after a bicycle ride and he realized that he had ridden across downtown in rush hour traffic. Didn't even realize he had done it. Picks up the phone and calls his wife. She came to pick him up, and they're driving home. And he says, you know, I could have been killed. I had no clue what I was doing. And she said, I've been thinking about that, and so what have you decided to do? He said, I've got the solution. Quit riding my bicycle. Didn't see the big picture, right? Yes, there's a time for medications, life-threatening situations, but we need to understand what they are, what they're doing for us, and not solving the problem. And I'd like to, again, say the same thing about a lot of the natural therapies. What actually heals the body? The body heals, that's all. The body is what does the healing. A doctor can't heal a body. One of my mentors told me years ago, don't ever take credit for healing anybody. If you do, you must also take credit for when they don't get well. Now, the body does its own healing. I'll never forget the day that I made the decision, the light finally went on, that I've been taking the responsibility of my patient's health. You know, that's what doctors do. You come see me, you're hurting, I'm going to fix it. But I can't fix it. I can't make your body heal itself. All I can do is educate. That's all I can do. And so I became a teacher. As I explained earlier, it's not, don't eat that. It's let me explain to you what happens when you do eat it. And sometimes I'll walk in a restaurant in the city I live in and see a patient, go up to greet them, and as they see me, they'll pick their plate up and put it underneath the table. And I said, you know, that doesn't hurt my feelings. See, I did my job. You got the message. Now you need to work on your part. That's complying with the message. But think about therapies. You know, the body heals itself. What part do therapies play? Whether it be colonic irrigations, foot reflexology, acupuncture, herbal therapies, homeopathy, all those things, what role do they play? And if you're looking to those to be the cure, you have the medical mentality. We've got to change that. What role do they play? Well, first of all, what's going to allow healing? 2 things. We've got to stop the negatives as best we understand them and can observe them. We've got to stop the negatives. And number two, we have to hand the body the basics. And I'm talking about nutrition. And this afternoon I'll get into that, the live food and why that's so important. We have to hand the body the food it was designed to run on. Now we may want to consider some therapy. What role does therapy play? Let's say you've got a rusty nut here and you've got a wrench, you're trying to get that, it's just not budging. Then you get some penetrating oil and spray on there and then take that wrench and boy, it comes right off there. Did the penetrating oil remove the nut? No, that was still your main strength and brute force. All the penetrating oil did was make that job more efficient. It promoted the process, or you might call it a catalyst. And so with therapies, they just simply promote a process of helping the body move towards health. And we need to be very careful as we think about engaging in various therapies that we have, number one, asked the question, what have I been doing wrong that caused this problem? Number two, have I introduced a lifestyle that's conducive to health and healing? And then number three, is this therapy appropriate for me as best I can understand it? In other words, you don't build a whole house with just a hammer. So at different times in your road back to health, there might be different therapies that would be appropriate. But to think of this therapy as the one that's going to fix everything, And again, there's the medical mindset. Where do food supplements come in? Whole food concentrates, where do they fit in? They're not the answer to health either. One time a fellow came up to me after a lecture and he said, all right, I understand this whole thing about whole foods and raw foods and live enzymes. I've got it. But can't I just take a handful of vitamin supplements and keep eating the way I'm eating? You can actually... Thanks. Can I just do that? And I said, well, it's kind of like this. Let's say you wanted to heat your house in the wintertime, but you left all the windows and the doors open. You could do it. It's just a very inefficient process and extremely costly, and ultimately you won't win. You're going to wear out that heater. So what are we going to look at first? What are we eating? And this afternoon I'm going to give you some guidelines and not just eat this, don't eat that. We're going to go into the science behind why live foods, and we're going to keep it simple. We're not going to make this complicated, but why the live foods are so needed if we're going to return to health. And then we might say, is there a need to supplement with some whole food supplements? Yeah, there usually is. And just a few quick principles on that in our closing time here. Number one, the quality of the fruits and vegetables we're getting this day are less and less. Every year, Rutgers University and United States Department of Agriculture do random samplings of fruits and vegetables across the nation. And every year, the nutrient levels are dropping. And some will use that excuse, well, the quality is so poor, I just won't eat them and I'll just take vitamins. So wait a minute. That is our only source of live enzymes. Number one, these raw fruits and vegetables, even though the quality is not what it used to be. But number two, if you're not going to eat those live foods, what are you going to eat? You're going to fill up with something. It's going to be dead things. Secondly, talking about the need for food supplementation, is that most people, because of past sins, eating too many processed foods and cooked foods and dead foods, have burned out the enzymes in their system, their ability to break down now the new diet, the raw fruits and vegetables. Cannot access all the value out of that food. So we're going to need to take some enzymes to start paying back some of the debt, but we also are going to need to supplement so we can pay back the debt. You see, just eating better doesn't automatically return us to health. I have to assimilate more nutrition than today's needs. See, that's what leads me to health. The body's first priority with the nutrition I assimilate today has nothing to do with healing. The body's first priority with that nutrition has to do with survival for today, and hopefully not borrow and go further in debt. So I need to assimilate above today's needs if I'm going to pay back debts. And it's pretty difficult to do that because I said of past sins, we have assimilation problems, plus there's just a limit to what we can assimilate, just the way God put us together. So we're going to need to supplement, but not looking at the supplements as the answer. That's my point. That's on top of a change of lifestyle. And when we do supplement, we want to use whole food concentrates, not processed, not fractionated vitamins, as most commonly found in health food stores. Health is a gift. Disease is something that we earn. It's our choice. There's only ultimately two reasons why we're sick. And I wish there was another one because I don't like either one of these. Both of these put the responsibility of health on me. You know, there's an unspoken contract between doctors and patients in this country. And it's like this: Doc, you make me feel better without telling me it's my responsibility, and I'll pay you money. But if you tell me I'm at fault and I've got to change doing what I like to do, I'm going somewhere else. What are the two reasons we're sick? The first one is ignorance. We are just ignorant of how to take care of our bodies. You know, we look around, all of society is doing it a certain way, and we assume that's just how it's supposed to be. That's what we grew up with. Ignorance. Number two is indifference or laziness. Now that I know that coffee is harmful to me, it's still up to me to say I'm not going to drink it. You know, ignorance is one of those things, the way that God put together this universe. There's laws that this universe runs on, and whether we are aware of those laws or not, we still pay the price if we violate them. It's like the fellow who jumped off the 20-story building thinking he could fly. You know, when he created a gooey mess at the bottom of the building there, he did not break the law of gravity. He illustrated it. And then, as I said, there's taking responsibility, both to educate ourselves, whether that be by reading, by attending conferences like this, or seeking out alternative or complementary healthcare practitioners, and then the responsibility of making that lifestyle change. It's ultimately on our individual shoulders. And we don't like that. I wish there was another out for me and you, but there's not, I'm afraid. We individually have to take that responsibility. Well, let me close with a story about this couple that was driving down the interstate, and the highway patrolman came up behind him, and he rolled about beside them, and he dropped back behind and turned his lights on. And he got out and walked up to the car, and he said, "Sir, the reason I pulled you over is because you did not have your seatbelt on." And the man said, "I did. You see it's on right now." The policeman said, "No, you put that on once you saw me." "No, I had it on." Boy, they argued back and forth. And finally, this officer looked at this man's wife sitting in the passenger seat, and he said, "Ma'am, you tell me, did he have a seatbelt on?" She said, "Sir, in all the years we've been married, there's one thing I've learned. Never argue with my husband when he's drunk."